Thank you for that, Professor Carpenter. While I'm at it, I want to recognize Dr. Gene Evans. He's a member of our Business Council. And I'm sorry I overlooked you in recognizing important personages. I'm glad you're here. And he's a member of the Ski Dee Band and practicing medical physician in our community here. And just wanted to recognize you, sir. At this time, I want to just take a liberty here of just moving forward into our next panel. This declaration, it covers a lot of subjects, including the plant world, our relatives in the plant world of these sacred foods that we enjoy and indigenous habitats. My wife's people, Pauline's people, they gather their roots and sacred foods. And I know that Linda Benally and President Burgess are members of the Native American Church, and their sacrament is that plant of power, the peyote medicine. And they are going to be taking part here in this next panel on traditional medicines and plants. And this is on behalf of the Pawnee Nation College. Michael Burgess is the president of the college. He hails from the Comanche Nation. And we're very fortunate to have him in our community here, president for quite a spell for our tribal college, which is a big asset to our community here. We have a lot of graduates that would not have been able to benefit from a higher education degree were it not for our college. And Linda is a longtime friend of mine, going all the way back to securing the passage of the 1994 amendments to the American Indian Act to protect the peyote religion. That's sacrament of the Native American Church. Her family is very well known, the Daish family, active leaders in the Native American Church, and we've kept in touch over the years, and I welcome her back to the Pawnee Nation. She was recently here for our Asakipiti Idu Young Dog Dance ceremony a couple weeks ago, and by golly, she's back again, and so it's good to see you. And so with that, I'd like to turn the discussion over to you. I don't know how you want to proceed, but the floor is yours. And you can either do it from your seated area or come up here to the podium. It's your choice. I see President Burgess is making his way to the podium. I myself, I feel naked without a podium to stand behind. So. Oh, and I also want to acknowledge Kimberly Craven in the audience. Long-time, she has a law degree as well from the Great Sioux Nation, and yes, a law graduate from CU Law, and she was a staffer for the great Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell on the Senate Select Committee for Indian Affairs at its golden hour, the crown jewel of making federal Indian law. It really was. It just cranked out one landmark statute after another, during that golden age there. So I'm glad that Kimberly is here today on behalf of the Indigenous Environmental Network.
Thank you, Heights. And for all of you attorneys here and people who are taking pictures, please do not make mine public. The only law I know sometimes is a speeding ticket or a failure to pay. So unless one of you are willing to stand up and represent pro bono. So anyhow, good afternoon. Yes, I've been up here some time. I did spend early years here, went to school with a lot of Pawnee folks. I knew Butch's brother at the time back in Lawrence, Kansas, and others, and Donna and I, we traversed across Haskell Indian Nation's junior college. She was there, I was leaving, told not to come back. So I didn't go back, Donna. They wouldn't even let me in for the 100-year celebration. But one thing I did learn along my travels, and I'm thankful for being at Haskell. I'm very thankful of a boarding school in one regards. It reinforced the culture. It did the opposite of what the United States government was trying to do, in that we were minority people among minorities. And so it infused me with the ability to get along with other folks and to make relationships, be a friend as possible. And so I'm up here among friends. And the one thing that I've come to understand about education is that there are many avenues to learn, but there are many people who learn along different avenues. And so one of the things I've learned here is that in order to incorporate educational initiative among our people, we need to bring something to them and take them to something that they would enjoy, that was new, an experience. And we found that with agriculture. Now, those who know the history of the Pawnee people, in the history books you would say semi-agriculture. They had crops, they had fields, but they also had to go out on a big hunt. So as a village, they went out, and whomever, or if anybody was left at the village to care for the crops, that was happening. As opposed to my people who just, when they came out on the plains, they stayed there with horses and buffalo. And so we don't have that history. However, here among the Pawnee people, their history goes back many years, if I want to say a century or two. Because the Pawnee O program, the Pawnee Agricultural Nutrition Initiative and Outreach Project, was to bring back knowledge of gardening skills, ability to work with the soil, and along the way encouraging those individuals who enthused themselves with this program to start home gardening. And it was right a year before this pandemic came along, and people soon saw that the grocery shelves were short of vegetables, fruits, and other staples. So what we're trying to do is bring back this skill to work with your home garden. Along the way, we've been encouraged by Oklahoma State University with its agriculture extension program to reach out to us and assist us. At Pawnee College, here in Pawnee, Oklahoma, one of the lowest employment rates in the state, losing population to other areas. However, our little college has been helping those folks, as President Echohawk said earlier, to continue, complete their education. Because I would say the average age of our freshmen is 28 years old. They may have a family of their own, second family, 2 or 3 kids at home, or both parents might be in school. And this is a way that they've been able to supplement themselves and take care of their children. So these tribal colleges, I'm bringing this out because I was just in UT Arlington last week, and the question there was, why a tribal college? What does it do for a community? Tribal colleges do a whole lot. We retain cultural experience and knowledge from the people who would leave and lose that cultural experience and knowledge. And so as our little college is growing here, the thing that hit me the most is the loss of these herbs, medicinal plants that our people would commonly use. And they don't always grow everywhere, but a lot of times they'll grow somewhere. And right now, that somewhere most generally is not on tribally owned or individual owned land. So the concept here is the Pawnee O Garden and the Pawnee O Nature Trail. We were trying to infuse people with the knowledge to do home gardening, utilizing centuries-old Pawnee seeds of corn and beans, squash, and melons. And these are plants endemic, I'm going to use that word here, for the Pawnee people, because even the Omaha and the Winnebago people of Nebraska thank them for sharing their seeds with them back in the days when they were starving and having a hard time. And so the Pawnee people shared this knowledge with other folks back in Nebraska and nearby. However, the problem we have today was the legal system, so attorneys don't get mad at me. Walter knows this. How are we going to protect these centuries-old seeds from becoming hybrid seeds and becoming commercial products without the support of the community that owns it? Again, that's another question that goes for the legal minds. And that's what we want to do here, is educate our students about their responsibility for the future and the protection of these plants. An example, my relative here, between her, the Shoshone people, and all the way to California, up where she's from, in Oregon, they pick pine nuts. And back in the 80s, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they were killing off all these pine trees, which were supportive of a food product for our relations up there in the high desert. And arguing that you don't own Nevada, you don't own these lands because in a treaty you gave it away, when the treaty said they could traverse across but not own. So again, this ancient, what do we call it, colonial law systems need to be rectified. And so my little college is not going to do that. So my little college is trying to help these future leaders to understand their role with plants, animals, and herbs, because we need that knowledge to continue. We need it for food security, food safety, and the self-development of these communities such as we have here. The situation in Oklahoma is allotments. Mr. Shawnee Chief here talked about land base, reservation status, going out and picking herbs alongside the highway. Down my home area, you can't cut a tree out there on public lands without permission, or you get fined or thrown in jail or whatever. Because my folks would cut trees down in public places for their Native American church ceremonies because they own no land, but that tree is dead standing up and it's a danger to any highway or people in storms. So there's another reason that the knowledge of what our Native people do and use with plants and animals is important to protect. And on side of that is sites. The Comanche Nation went through 11 years ago a hard time with Fort Sill, the Army base, over the Medicine Bluffs issue. And the day I was leaving office, or a few days before, I got a call that the commandant at Fort Sill was signing off on an agreement that there would always be access and availability, a way to get up to Medicine Bluffs. And it wasn't just Comanches, it's Kiowas, Wichitas, Apaches, Caddos. All these tribes would go to those Medicine Bluffs at some time. And it was an area, when you were there, your enemies left you alone. It was a place of worship, and we all understood it because we all used it. So here recently, in the last 6 months, I was called upon to get a copy of that document. Going through my records, all I had was a note that said, the commandant called me and said, I'm signing off on the documents today. Now they can't find that document on base. They cannot locate that document, and they say, we never did sign it. However, if a commandant's going to call me at my office and say, well, I'm signing off on this today, Chairman Burgess, it's going to go into effect. Now they can't show it. So there's another point here. Even the military itself, again, you talked about the Oaks, or what's that area in California? That land base, yeah. That is a religious ceremonial site, and these are important to our peoples. So it's very important that our future leaders, which is what tribal colleges should be doing and can be doing and will do, train our leadership to become aware of these policies, these laws, and these documents, and try to incorporate that into the future protection of their land base. So here in Oklahoma, I don't know how many tribes, most tribes do have an environmental protection grant agency or something. Donna can correct me on this. But they do not always have an environmental or natural resource management office, which is where the EPA, air studies, water studies, all of that could come underneath natural resources division. So my little college, under what I understand tribal governments need, background in natural resources. So there was another reason to go into the soil sciences, gardening, and protection, because now with this UNDRIP here, or the DRIP, tribes can establish their natural resources department and start to negotiate with on their lands, establishing these garden areas for herbs, medicine plants, those things that they use in their traditional manner, and make that as a preservation area, our own park systems on the tribal lands. Because at some point in time, my people like to go to the Wichita Mountains and pick sage, or they pick certain cedar. But the regulations are you can't go get it. Someone has to go get it for you. Well, when you have a Native American church service, you might want to use a bag of cedar this deep. But they come over there with a little bit of one burn. Or they come over with short sage. When everybody, 20 people in a teepee might use that one sage, and it's gone after one round. But you use it throughout the night. So these kinds of ceremonial practices are not shared with the non-native. The reason being, they misinterpret. I think one of you mentioned that today, how that interpretation from someone else's viewpoint doesn't fit with what our native people have. So it's highly important for our educational systems to understand the need for more STEM training in our tribal colleges, more support. I'm going to use this by the legal systems, especially the educational systems, that our native people, while they go off to college, they need to come home to work for the people in these home areas, these areas that we're talking about here today, legal policy, procedures, and practice. So with the tribal college that I'm working here today, I'm very thankful the people have allowed me to stay this long. Well, I say that, as Walter and Donna knows, I've worked for 5 different tribal governments. And this has been a very rewarding part of my career, because I never wanted to be a politician, and I never thought I'd be an educator. So I'm learning a whole lot myself. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda here and some of the concepts that we talk about with the Native American Church and the ERFA.
Let's see if I can adjust the mic without making it fall. Okay. Let me do a sound check. Am I coming through okay? Okay, great. Yat eha nalsko bit anin shlohash kahanzo bashashin na kaida ne dashanalado tachini dashache. Not ani nez holiere are eyaha shiaho ayaha astan shla ado Linda Benali hot shije. I'd like to thank Sue and Kristen for leading this implementation project, very important work. I certainly feel privileged to be able to join you all today and to offer remarks and comments. I mean, I truly am humbled to be a part of the agenda today, and just among esteemed individuals who have just done and are continuing to do tremendous work. I'd like to thank the Pawnee Nation, President Echohawk, for the foresight that you have in leading the people in the manner, leading your people in the manner that you are. What we wanted to do is speak a little bit about traditional plants and medicines, and Mr. Burgess talked a bit already and laid some of the framework. What I'd like to do is weave in some of the articles I think that are underpinning some of the comments that we think are important to this topic. So I don't think I'm speaking to folks who don't know this, but I'd like to just make the comment that in indigenous communities across the United States, physical places, such as the land, the water, hills, streams, and prayer sites are significant and sacred. And some Indian nations also revere the Mother Earth's natural elements, such as the air. So for example, in the Navajo worldview, air, or nilche, is conceived as a holiness and powers that are not necessarily acknowledged by the European cultures. So I think in a general sense, traditional Native American thought, there's really nothing that can be labeled non-religious or having some degree of sacred value. And these areas, these places that I mentioned are significant because Native peoples congregate for cultural expression at these places. And I think each one of us sitting here in this room can think of what that cultural expression might be for your own tribal people or your own Indian nations. It could be in the form of a dance or ceremonial events, or in our most recent traditions, the Native American church that Mike had mentioned. And maybe not so recent, I think it's been around for years. And Mike touched on how these sacred or religious sites include the actual land sites that host medicinal plants. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. What I'd like to do is move on to another topic because I think Mike's covered that fairly well. And what I'd like for you to do is sort of shift your thinking to the peyote gardens that are located in Texas. As you heard earlier today, the Declaration articulates rights that are held by indigenous peoples. And as rights holders under the Declaration, Native nations and individuals have the right to the traditional medicines and plants, cultural and spiritual practices. With the Declaration, Native peoples' rights include rights to sacred places that are within their territorial boundaries, in addition to, and very importantly, those that are outside their boundaries and beyond. And I believe that is a place where the peyote gardens, the Holy Land for Native American church people comes into play. And as duty bearer of the Declaration, the United States has a responsibility to prevent infringement on these rights. So some of you may know that the peyote, the only place that it grows in the United States is in the desert region of the Southwest, of southern Texas. And to many indigenous communities, peyote is a sacred cactus plant that's consumed as a part of religious tribal ceremonies that are used for worship and for healing purposes. In contemporary times, it is hard to believe that the Native American church, which is one of the oldest religious traditions in the Western Hemisphere, is amid a crisis due to the diminishing availability of the very important sacrament. I believe and assert that the peyote gardens in southern Texas fall under the protections of Article 12 of the Declaration. And that is just very generally described as the right to manifest, practice, develop, and teach spiritual and religious traditions, customs, and ceremonies. It's a very broad article, but nonetheless, I believe that is one that the NAC falls under. The church has historically relied on the sacramental plant for medicinal and religious use, and peyote is central to the Native American church. As some of you may be aware in this room, it's regarded as a deity. And if there is no peyote, then there is no ceremony. And what we're experiencing today is the shortage of availability of the sacrament for many, many reasons that has been occurring over the years. And one of those reasons is development. We have development that's going on in southern Texas and has been, and the land profile has changed over the years. You know, when the sacrament was being harvested years ago, I think you had different landowners, you had relationships between the landowners and the peyoteros who were harvesting the sacrament. And over the years, the land ownership has changed, the development has changed, the economic benefit for the ranchers and the landowners has also changed. And this development, and that's just one example, and I think if you think about this generally, that also occurs in lots of other places where you have sacred sites or religious sites sometimes are not at the forefront or even on the mind of the developers who are coming through and clearing the land with some of these medicinal plants that are on the land. And when that happens, the plants and the medicines that rely on that healthy land doesn't exist anymore. There's not the opportunity to reseed itself, and then you have a decreased abundance of that sacrament. And Mr. Burgess already alluded to the fact that some of the medicines, traditional medicines and plants, are on private lands. And we, as the NAC or practitioners maybe who use these medicines, don't have access to it. Sometimes we can't even see the actual plants in its original environment because we just don't have access. And again, because of zoning and development. And as I mentioned, the case in point, the sacrament that is in Texas. And I think development is just not considerate of other people's cultures. And as I've listened today, and as I've been reading material in preparation for the remarks today, the declaration is a tool that can redress some of these infringements. I already talked about an article I thought was relevant. I'll mention a few more. Article 12 affords the right to maintain, protect, and have access in privacy to religious and cultural rights, as well as rights in Article 25 to access sacred lands beyond our reservation boundaries, which I already alluded to. And then you have Article 12 and 25 combined with Article 24, which is conservation of vital medicinal plants. All of those three things combined, I think, would help address the crisis that the Native American Church is facing relative to the decreased availability of the sacrament. In fact, in this regard, in 2012, the Native American Church made an oral statement at the conference in consultation with the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous People. At that time, it was Mr. James Anaya, who you heard from this morning. The comments at that time centered on the biological health and status of its value as the religious sacrament of the Native American Church. That was in 2012. I believe the declaration was adopted by the United States in 2010, if I recall correctly. So it was 2 years after President Obama had endorsed the declaration. We brought that forth. We made oral comments. We provided a written statement. At that time, we were not in the crisis state. I think we were at the point of sort of recognizing we were moving in that direction, but we did raise it to that forum because we really felt like it was appropriate, and for all the reasons I talked about, right, the various articles that I referenced. The letter that we wrote to the Special Rapporteur, Anaya, followed a National Congress of American NCAI resolution that was passed in 2009 in support of the Native American Church of North America and their ability to harvest peyote. That resolution resolved to form a working group to, and I quote, explore all possible options to protect access to peyote, including but not limited to potential legislation creating a peyote reserve or refuge. And as I was reflecting on all of that prior work that we had been engaged in, it appeared to me that it was somewhat contradictory, and I would even say derelict, for the federal government to grant Native American church members the right to purchase and use peyote religiously, while simultaneously failing to provide any lands that are designated as federal or tribal peyote farms where peyoteros can go and harvest for the purpose of serving the Native American Church. I also want to touch on an article that I think is also relevant, and it has come up several times throughout the day, and that is Article 38. And that says, in implementing the declaration, the United States is also obligated to, and I'm quoting in part, in conjunction and cooperation with indigenous peoples to take the appropriate measures, including legislative measures, to achieve the ends of this declaration. And I believe that with this education that is occurring, the purpose of this workshop, this intertribal workshop today, taking this and building on the work that was done by the Native American Church in 2009, 2012, and into recent times, we find ourselves again in this crisis state. I think we have a tool that will help us assert and protect the rights of indigenous peoples to have access to their traditional medicines, access to their sacred sites, and sacred lands on which these medicines and plants grow. And I'm not going to say anything new because I've heard it several times today, but it also presents a new opportunity. I think it's a new kind of legal authority that can help Native peoples to secure rights to these sacred places and traditional medicines and traditional plants. And I think the key part of it is educating ourselves, asserting our rights. And I was jotting notes down earlier today about all the inspiring words for me on sort of getting us to a point of, this is the generation that is tasked with the responsibility of strengthening the rights and standing on the shoulders of those who have gone before us. So I was just really feeling very replenished in energy and intellectual thought, all of that today. So it was very, very a good feeling to be here with you all today in Pawnee country. In closing, what I'd like to share with all of you is that, and this is really, I guess, echoing what Mr. Burgess stated earlier, and that's really the importance to all leaders, the responsibility they have to understand and support the regulations, such as the declaration articles that we talked about today, relating to the use of medicinal plants, herbs, and other associated fauna that are used for healing purposes. And of course, as I touched on already, this also includes the Holy Land, the peyote gardens, as the Native American Church refers to it, as well. So again, that closes my remarks, and I just, again, want to say thank you very much for allowing us to engage and be with you today. Yeah.
Thank you, Linda, and also Michael for your presentation. Certainly, no deliberation of this nature is complete without thinking about our relatives in the plant world, and so I thank you all for drawing that to our attention and reminding us that the Declaration is very relevant for protecting the indigenous habitats of our native plants, of our medicine and medicinal plants. Professor